get the dogs back inside. And all I remember is I looked down and my shirt's just like soaked with blood. And I didn't know, like I was in shock. I didn't know what had happened. My arms bleeding, my legs bleeding. And like their white porch furniture is just like covered in blood.
Welcome back, everybody. Stop Interviewing, Start Selling. I'm your host, Philip Meyer, and today we have a very special guest on our show. First and foremost, let me apologize to my subscribers, my listeners on LinkedIn. It's been a long time since I've done a podcast, but I came across this story and this particular person, and it inspired me to get back into it and kind of make some other arrangements to get this thing going. So today we have Mariah Brown. Thank you so much for joining my show. How's everything going for you?
Great. I'm super happy to be here. I'm in my in-laws' house for the holidays, so we're partying hardy.
Awesome. Very cool. So you're located in East Idaho, like myself, right? You're in Pocatello, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I'm in Rexburg.
Oh, Rexburg. Okay, very cool. That's so weird. My in-laws are in Rexburg as well, so it's a small world. Very cool.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So before we jump into the moment that I know that a lot of people are probably waiting for based on the thumbnail and based on the title of this podcast, I really want to ask you, why sales? Because I'm so curious to find out how you got into it. What was it that drew you in? Why not do something else? Why do sales?
Sure. So I started out school actually as an English major, believe it or not. Worst decision ever. Hated it. I went into communication because I really liked what it was offering. And then I started taking some different classes. And then I knew that I was really good at it. I knew that I was like, oh, I really excel in this subject and I'm really good at talking to people. And so I actually wanted to go give coach tours up in Alaska one summer. And then I didn't really like the hours and like the way that the schedule worked. And so my husband, he served a church mission with his buddy, Jared. And Jared, it was his second summer doing sales. I sell with a company called Aptive Environmental. So Jared had been doing it, and we kind of reached out to him and said, hey, we don't want to work during the school year because that's way too much on our plate, but we want to make enough money to last throughout the year. And he said, hey, if you really apply yourself, the job's hard, but if you apply yourself, that can be reality for you guys. And so we went out, and my husband did great. He was just right about on the average line, the median. And then I, to my own horn here, I topped all the guys on my team, and I just really found a thriving environment, really my niche.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. So I've heard a lot of people go into pest control. And in fact, I had my cousin on the show just a while back, and he was talking about going into it as well. It seems to be a pretty large industry right now. And I'm wondering, what was your first experience with it? Did you take the sales training pretty well? What were you most nervous about? And ultimately, at the end of that journey with Aptive, what do you think that you improved on the most?
I think, yeah, that's a really good question. For me, so I was on a team at first with all guys. It was me and 15 guys. And that didn't really intimidate me. Most of my friends are growing up were guys, but I felt like everything that we learned was pretty monotonous. Pretty much the pitch was always the same. And so what I did is I took it upon myself to reach out to multiple women in the company. And I would train 4 days a week with different women. And they really showed me how to make the pitch my own and to be yourself while you sell. And so I think that was my biggest strength going into this season, was that not only did I take the trainings very seriously, read our sales manual every day, but I also trained a ton outside of our meetings with people that I wanted to be more like.
Yeah. So what you just said there is the entire precipice of the reason I have a podcast. It's not because I think I'm a sales expert or because I think very highly of myself. I totally don't.
Sure.
In fact, I can't even listen back to my own episodes because I hate listening to myself talk. But
Amen.
one thing that I realized with having a platform like this is that I'm able to get in touch with different salespeople and be able to talk to them on a one-on-one basis that I wouldn't normally be able to. And as a weird side effect, I've learned so much from these salespeople that are just so good at what they do, right? So that's awesome that you reached out and you found mentors, especially people that you want to be like, because that's what I'm doing now, and I think that's changed up the game tremendously. So now,
Totally.
how long were you with Aptiv?
So I'm actually still with Aptiv.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. So I signed with them over a year ago, and then I trained really hard in the off season. Went out last summer. It was my first summer, actually. And I kind of blew it out of the water. I loved it, except for the fact that I went to the ER twice, and we'll get into that soon. But then I came home, and I'm interning for another sales company this winter for school. And I'll be with them for just the semester and then going back out with Aptiv again. So right now I'm recruiting. I have a couple recruits coming with me, a couple friends. And so, yeah, I'm still with them and I'm loving it.
Awesome. That's great. So, just for clarity's sake, so Aptiv as pest control, you guys are going door to door. Is that more residential or is it more commercial?
Good question. Yeah. It's residential. It's in northern Atlanta. So like Cumming, Alpharetta, Woodstock, places like that. And yeah, just knocking doors.
Gotcha. Very cool. That's not an easy thing to do. I mean, myself, I go much more like business to business. That's kind of my niche market.
Sure.
I tried residential once. Wasn't my thing, to be honest with you. So
it takes a lot of guts.
It does. Yeah. It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of grit. And ultimately, I think I respect people a lot more that are able to do residential first, then kind of branch off. And one of the crazy things too, I've seen is that there's so much money to be made with doing this, like, especially for those. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's people that, who like, I know personally that did that for a couple summers. And then all of a sudden they gleaned so much information from that business as a whole that they were, that they were able to open up their own businesses and kind of replicate that, which is just amazing to me to see that. So yeah.
Sure.
So then
and I think for me, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for me that it kind of runs in the family too. Like my brother, he's the head of growth at Wise. My father-in-law does business to business sales at ThermalWorks. And so, it's really like kind of environment, and there's people around me that are just like talking about it too. So it was never something that I thought I would do, but now that I am doing it, it's like, oh yeah, this is really natural to me.
Yeah. So that's actually my next question for you, because it's always interesting to kind of find out what someone's career path is going to be, or kind of what their thoughts are. So like right now, with your experience that you've had and with the career path that you're on now, do you see this as being like a career for like long term, or would you like to open up your own business or just be like a producer your whole life?
Good question. I was actually just talking to my father-in-law and my mother-in-law about this, and they said you can't, they said you can't teach someone how to sell. And I said, I don't really agree with that. I think you can definitely teach someone to a certain extent, but for me, it does come really naturally. Just the people skills, the pitch and the sales part. I mean, that's all taught, that's true. As people skills, a lot of that comes naturally. And so for me, I would like to pursue sales or marketing long-term. I don't know if Aptiv's going to be like a 10, 12-year thing for me. Probably not. I'm thinking I'll give it till maybe like 26 or something like that. So I'm 22 right now, maybe like another 4 years or something, because it's really great money for my husband and I. And then we can still do school in the off season. But long-term, so I'm a comm major and a business management minor. I'm looking at some positions at Wise, which is a tech company up in Seattle. And that's where my brother is the head of growth there. And so I'd be doing some email marketing and things like that for them. But long term, weird enough as it sounds, I'd like to teach. I'd like to go back to a high school or a college level and teach kids communication skills, because I think that they're super undertaught in the American public school system.
Yeah. It's funny. My wife and I were just talking about that because I feel like I see so many kids nowadays with like a cell phone or a tablet in their hand, and they just don't know how to talk to others. Back when I used to teach martial arts, that was one of the things that I really, really emphasized was just go up and say hi and just introduce yourself. And you'd be surprised at how many kids that are like 7 years old to like 12 or 13 that are just terrified to do that. They stutter all over themselves. They can't do it. And I'm just like, what are we doing to our kids these days? It's just insane. So yeah. So that's awesome that you want to do
You're
that.
totally right. And I think that every kid needs, I just think that every kid needs an opportunity growing up to, and I think this is what developed my skills, is for 5 years between the ages of 14 to 19, I did a high adventure leadership training program. It's called Cedar Badge. And it's where youth ages 12 to 21, they go up into the mountains and you run them like down rapids, up rock walls, and you teach them leadership skills and communication skills. So me having done that all through my teenage years, and I was the president of the board of directors at one point of the program. Wow. And so having all that experience under my belt, before I was 19, absolutely impacted the way I, serve in my church and and especially the way that I sell.
Wow. That's really cool. Man, it's so cool. There's programs like that out there. So let's get into, so first of all, let me tell you just a quick story about how I came across your story.
Sure.
So I was in Salt Lake City with my sales manager, Chris. So shout out to Chris Baker. And like I was sitting there on LinkedIn going through like all my LinkedIn pages, whatever, because I'm super active on that. And he asked me just like randomly, he goes, "Oh, dude, did you see this girl that got bit by the dog?" And I'm like, there was a girl that got bit by a dog? Like, I'm thinking he's talking about the news. And I'm like, no, I didn't see anybody get bit by a dog. He's like, no, on LinkedIn. So like, I look up the story, and let me share this picture too, just so everybody can see here. Let me share my screen. Bear with me here, because I don't usually share my screen with people. Oh, there it is, the big green button in front of my face. Multiple. Okay, go like this. This is great for podcast material, by the way, just listening to me trying to all right.
You can edit it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. Okay, there we go. All right, so screen share, and I'll go to as soon as it gets red. All right, can you see that right now?
There's a little bit of a lag on my end.
Okay, for a sec.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, so that's you in the hospital, right?
That's right.
Okay, so before we get into what happened, how many people, like,
you got it,
how many people actually viewed the story on your LinkedIn page? Can you hear me okay?
Sorry, yeah, you're cutting in and out, but I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So how many people actually viewed this story on your LinkedIn page?
It was like over 2,000, almost 3,000.
Wow, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So let me click off of this real fast because it won't be as laggy. All right, stop share. All right, so we're back. So what happened? I mean, you're out there prospecting, you're door knocking. Tell me what came next.
Right. So, I mean, I was in the little neighborhood in Woodstock, Georgia. I had just sold this guy, really nice guy. He was on one side of the cul-de-sac, and I knocked a couple other houses. Nobody was home. And then I went to the house right across from him. I walked up their porch, and it's like a ranch house. So it's got a gate in the front, like white fencing, gate around the front of the porch. And there's stairs going down from that. So I couldn't have jumped the gate. I walk in, and there's like a silly sign that's like, beware strange dog. And people have got weird, quirky signs like that all the time. And everyone's got a dog. so I didn't think anything of it. Like if it said beware of dog, like I would have been like, okay, it'd be a little hesitant. But I went right in. I shut the gate behind me because I didn't want the dogs to get out. The inside door was open, but the storm door was closed. So I could see into the house. So I go and I knock on the door. And what's natural in sales, you've heard of the sunrise smile. You look up and you smile, right? So I'm looking down at my iPad, just doing everything normal. And then I hear, woo, 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 and I look up, and the first thing I see is this black pit bull just bursts through the door, and it comes right here. And I actually am wearing a shirt that not on purpose, but you can see that I've got 3 teeth marks here. 1, 2, and 3.
Oh my goodness.
And then it ripped through right here. It's healed pretty well. This one's still pretty gnarly, but so there were 3 dogs total. A big black pit bull got me on the neck, and then some mid-sized mutts. One got me on the elbow. Another one got me really bad on the leg. And then I had a lot of bruising all over from where they bit me, and it hadn't broken skin. I just remember I was just screaming, and I just froze. I mean, I couldn't jump, I couldn't run, I couldn't do anything. And the owners come out, and they like get the dogs back inside. And all I remember is I looked down, and my shirt's just like soaked with blood. And I didn't know, like I was in shock. I didn't know what had happened. My arms bleeding, my legs bleeding. And like their white porch furniture is just like covered in blood. And I was like, holy fetch, like I'm going to bleed out right here. So I called my husband like 4 times. And these people are like sitting here. They've given me paper towels, and I'm in shock, and I'm on the phone with him, and I'm like totally calm though. And I'm talking to them, and I'm like, yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, I shouldn't have come in the door. I shouldn't have knocked on your door. I just sold your neighbor, Gary, like I take care of him, So I called my husband 3 times before he answered, and he like rushes over. And on my way to the hospital, I actually got a phone call from a potential customer, and I sold him on the way to the hospital. So the grind, right? But we got there, and they patched me up, and I was pretty shaken, but we were there for like 5 hours, but they couldn't stitch anything because of it could have gotten infected. So
wow,
that's the story.
Wow. So on a scale of 1 to 10, like 1 being, it's not that big a deal, and then 10 being freaking very, like how terrified were you at that moment?
In the moment, so I grew up with dogs. My parents are actually dog breeders, and I've seen many dog fights. I've grown up around dogs, and so usually when dogs run out at me aggressively, like I just kind of stand there and act very calm, But when it came up and bit me, I just was like, it was just almost like a white cloth came across my vision. I just was like frozen. I don't know. My body took a screenshot, I think. That's the best way to explain it.
Wow. Like, and the crazy thing too is, like, I remember you said something in your post. I'm not going to bring it up on the screen again because it'll make everything freeze. But
okay.
you said something in your post about how like you came back after your injury, and you still made your quota. Like I think you had like 2 weeks left or something like that. Like explain that part to me, because I wasn't quite clear on how that worked.
Yeah. So another girl on our team had actually been bitten by a dog earlier in the season, and she was like done. She was like, can't do it, won't go back. But me, I really wanted to hit my goal, and like my goals are like really important to me, and it's not something that I give up on easily. And so I told my team leader, I said the night that I got back from the hospital, I said, you will see me on the doors by Saturday. And that was on a Thursday. So I took a day off of work. Wait, let me think. Yeah, I took a day off of work, and the day after that, I was back on the doors. I only did a half day, and I was pretty gentle with myself, and I had bandages on my knees, my arms, my neck. I think people probably thought I was homeless coming and knocking on their door, and asking for help. But yeah, I got back on it. But because I was set back, like because of the emotional, it was like really hard for me to be around big dogs after that for a little bit. And also like people with open storm doors, that was also really scary. And so I just didn't perform as well as I should have during the end of July and throughout August. So I decided to actually extend my season for 2 weeks at the end. And I have school and I have a lot of things that I would like to get home for. And obviously there's burnout, towards the end of the summer, everyone gets it. But I decided to come back, and I sold in Orlando for those last 2 weeks. And those were really fetching hard. I mean, those last 2 weeks, there's nothing more that I wanted than to go home and recover, and to be with my family after all that had happened. But in order to hit my goal, my goal was to bring in $150,000 in revenue. And so I stayed those extra 2 weeks, and I ended up hitting like 153 or 156 or something like that. But it was totally worth it because that it just was a big like promotion for me in the company, and gave me, most importantly, I think it gave me confidence in myself, because I had proven to myself that I could do something and that I would do something. And even if I had any reason, like every reason in the world to have an excuse to not do it, that I could still do it anyway. And so that was a huge confidence builder for me.
Wow. So you hit on so many things there that I want to talk to you about, because like, I feel like this is not a common thing for people to understand. And number one, I mean, the fact that you were attacked by a pit bull and you had your neck bitten, like the first question I have for you on that is like, it's like, obviously your shirt's covered in blood. Was it close to your artery? Because that's my first thought, is if it bites you on your neck and it hits your artery, like it's pretty much game over at that point, right? I mean,
right.
Like it was super close, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Like, and then my second question is, as far as the dog owners, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are wondering this question, or listening, as far as the dog owners go, like what was their liability in this? I mean, were they super apologetic, or they're just kind of like, yeah, that's Roscoe, huh? He's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So they, first of all, the people at the house, it wasn't their dog, it was their son's dog who was visiting. So we filed a bite claim with the police, and unfortunately the son didn't have any bite insurance, but the dad did able to get their insurance. They paid for all of our hospital bills, which was super nice of them. And which was lucky, because we had to do a lot of x-rays on my collarbone as well. And like I said, I totally thought that I was absolutely dying at first with all the blood that was coming down. And I thought that they had hit an artery, but I just like couldn't feel it or something. But it was actually just about, an inch and a half away from an artery where it could have done something really bad. But luckily it wasn't, and it didn't chip my bone. It didn't do hardly anything. I mean, he went almost right about around the collarbone here. But it didn't scratch the bone or chip it at all, which was crazy.
Wow.
So luckily we got our bills paid for as well, which was really nice by their insurance.
Well, I mean, that's kind of secondary. I mean, compared to the potential to lose your life. I mean, like, I'm sure there's not a lot of salespeople out there that could be like,
sure, yeah,
I risked my life today selling, like,
Oh, Gil. Just another day in the office.
Yeah. So with your social media page with LinkedIn, when this went up, when you posted this, it's like, I mean, I know I reached out to you. Like, do you have other people reach out to you, like recruiters and people like saying, you should come sell for us, you're a badass, you're amazing, like the fact you did that, super savage, like what's been the response from your social media page on that?
Totally. Good question. I've had a ton of response. I posted it on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I think on Instagram. I meant to do it a long time ago, but I was still like formulating like my thoughts and stuff. And I get people, if I'm being totally honest, probably once a day reach out to me, try to recruit for either solar or I had one guy today reach out to me for another pest control company. So I get a ton of recruiters from mostly solar and pest control, other door-to-door companies. So far, none of them I've even considered, because And I think that's why I really like Aptive so much, is because they keep such a positive and like a forward moving environment, and it's all about like bettering yourself. And so far there hasn't been any reason for me to leave my current job, even though, like I had an accident or something like that, but the whole team and the whole company's been super supportive. So
that's awesome to hear, because like I know right now with the market the way that it is, it's really, really tough to find good people. In fact, my sales manager, when he was reading your story, he looked at me and he goes, "Hey, so she's in East Idaho like you, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "What do you think, man? Do you want to split up your territory and I'll give her a job and you a job and you can both work that area?" I was like, "Absolutely not. Can't split my territory. It's not going to happen." But yeah. So that being said, if you're ever looking for a job with UniFirst Corporation and one just happens to open up in East Idaho, you're probably going to get it. Just going to let you know that.
Sure. I appreciate that.
But yeah, it's crazy now because so many people reach out to like President's Club Achievers and to people that are super active on LinkedIn. Like that's why I was wondering, because it seems like with that post, like, it's like, other than that, have you been really active with LinkedIn at all? And how do you feel like that's affected your career?
Sure. And I'm actually pretty new to LinkedIn. I returned home. I lived in Las Vegas for 18 months for my church mission that I served.
Nice.
And I came, and I loved it. I thrived a lot. And I came back and I dived back into school because I started back in 2018. So I dived back into school and I took a couple of classes actually that specialized in LinkedIn and networking. And so I was actually required to, like, finally, I knew I should have done it, but I was finally required to, and got a grade for updating everything, posting regularly, connecting with people. And then I just really fell in love with it. Like I go to LinkedIn before I go to Instagram or before I go to Facebook or anything when I'm bored. It's like a Facebook for the business world.
Yeah.
And so I've actually had a ton of success with LinkedIn. That's where I found my internship. I met Devin, who
Mm-hmm.
and
Shout out,
and I
Devin.
connected. Yeah, shout out to Devin Dowling. He's awesome. I haven't met you in person, but I found your LinkedIn, and that's how I became interested in Stukent. And so through that, I've actually introduced a couple other people to Stukent that are interested in applying there, and I've just been working my tail off on LinkedIn, and I enjoy it. It comes really naturally to me, and now it's not something that I get a grade for, but it's something I enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's something I feel like, and this might be a message to those people listening, but if you are a sales rep and you're not active on LinkedIn, you should be. Like share stories, share posts, videos and stuff, because like, I mean, I've seen it work wonders for my career, because now I feel like there's a lot of people within my company that now recognize who I am. They know my name. They follow me on LinkedIn. They see me. Like I have customers that will reach out to me on LinkedIn as well and kind of ask me for quotes or like, things of that nature. But from a company standpoint, like I hope that more companies encourage people to use it and also really utilize that social media, not just to reach out and try to sell to somebody, but just to let people know what you're doing. Because as salespeople, I'm sure that you get this all the time, but like as salespeople, we're kind of looked at as like, it's a salesperson. I don't want to talk to that person. Right.
Totally. Yeah. The scum of the earth.
Yeah, exactly. But like, if they see you as a human, I feel like it just makes things so much easier, So,
yeah.
But that being said too, like you mentioned, that going back to achieve your goal was something that was very, very important to you. Where does that come from? Does that come from like your background in volleyball? Does it come from competitive sports, or have you always been that way?
Yeah, it actually absolutely comes from my athletic background. I mean, growing up, I was a 3-sport athlete. I was going year round. In the summer, I had club sports. And I was like, I said yes to everything, and I never knew how to say no to anything. So then I became involved in everything.
Okay.
The saying, they say a jack of all trades is a master of none, but is always better than a master of none. And so, no, sorry, is always better than a master of one. That's what it is. And so I was a jack of all trades growing up. Not only did I do sports, volleyball, basketball, I ran track in high school, but I also was like in a traveling orchestra and in the like swing choir that also traveled. And then I also was like a senator in DC for a while for like a youth senator program. And my parents just supported me through everything. And they just encouraged me to go get anything that I ever wanted. And so I never really learned that I couldn't have anything that I wanted for any reason, which I really am grateful to them. Shout out to my parents because they always encouraged me. They told me that I could do whatever I wanted and anything and everything that I wanted to. And so I did that.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I feel like accomplishing goals, especially in sales, like it's so easy to be defeated, right? Because in sales, like they tell you, or at least when I was coming up through like my first sales job, they told me just get to as many no's as it takes to get to one yes, right?
Totally.
Because then that's all that matters. And so like literally as salespeople, more often than not, we're kind of facing that constant rejection, that constant failure, right? Of people saying,
yeah,
or like, no, you can't come into my house, or I've already got pest control or whatever. As a salesperson and as somebody that is goal oriented, that's hyper focused on that goal, what advice do you have for people listening that are wondering how do you deal with that kind of rejection on a daily basis?
Let me ask you this question. What's your favorite video game?
My favorite video game of all time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Just a fair warning. If you ask me questions like that, the gigantic nerd in me is going to come out.
I can tell. No, there's a little nerd in you and there's a little nerd in me.
Honestly, I'm a huge Batman fan. Like I would like to say something that's like, like classic because I'm older and say like Mortal Kombat or whatever. But my favorite video game of all time has been Batman Arkham City. That's my favorite.
Sure. Yeah, and I never played that game, but my husband did. So in that game, the whole and almost any video game, right, is centralized around overcoming problems, right? Almost the plot of any movie, any video game. And every turn, there's a new enemy, whether it's the little guys, and you work up to the big bosses until you beat it. And so for me, I actually think of sales as a video game. And each no is just one of the little bosses. And every time I can have a little victory, like rolling through their objections or smiling and nodding or not getting down on myself, that's how I beat the little bosses. And when I find the people that are interested, then those are the big bosses. And I know if I roll enough objections, keep my facial expressions right, and just follow my roadmap and be myself, that I'll win. And I'm really competitive, so I really like that. So for me, door-to-door sales is awesome because I feel like there's a lot of winning involved. But you have to beat the little guys first, and you have to brush them off your shoulder. They might give you a little bit of damage, but at the end of the day, they're not your goal. You just have to keep moving on.
Right. Yeah. Like, and I would imagine that philosophy is so much more important in your kind of industry, right? Because for you, like you're only in one territory for like a limited time, and your first call, maybe I'm wrong because like I don't know the industry super well, but like let me know if this is correct. Okay. So like if you go into a business, see, I'm used to talking to my own reps. Like if you go into a house
doing your thing
and you're talking to that person, let's say that they say no, like is there any follow-up after that? Is there any coming back and trying that door again?
It really depends. It depends on the person. But you can usually tell, especially when you've been doing it for a while, you can usually tell when they're like, and I'm like, all right, and so some people you go back. It also depends on how desperate you are that day. Like if I'm on a roll, I'll be like, all right, dude, I'm out of here. Like I'll never see that guy again. And that also gives me a lot of confidence knowing that I'll never see him again. So usually no, I would be honest, like almost never do I go back to people because it's just a waste of my time and their patience. But occasionally when people are like, no, like I need this, please come back. Like there was a time last summer where there was a lady who only spoke French. and I didn't speak any French. I don't speak any other languages, half Spanish. And she was like talking in French, and I was like pointing to the bugs on my iPad, and she's like, yes, in my house, she was like trying to motion me into her house. And I came back later with one of my good friends on the phone who spoke French. And he like talked to her, and he was like, all right, this is going to be like this much a month, and you're signing up for like a contract. And she's like, yes, got it. Let's go. Let's do it. It's good. And so yes, in some cases when you know how you can overcome their objection later and they will pull through, you do go back, but most of the time, no, you don't. You just leave it.
Gotcha. That's so different from like what I do, right? Because I mean, like most reps in my company, we have a designated territory that's super protected. You can't sell in somebody else's territory, whatever, right? So I mean, like I just signed up an account this past week that I've been dealing with for the past like year and a half, right? Like in most times too, like there's a lot of like contracts involved, contractual obligations or whatever. So you kind of have to get around that and wait for the timing to be right. So it's really interesting to hear that there's more than one way to skin a cat or a dog.
For sure.
Especially when it bites you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that business to business sales are really unique in that way, in that, it takes a lot of like relationship building, and it's not an emotional decision.
Right.
Whereas I hate to admit it, but a lot of the times in door-to-door sales, it is an emotional decision. You're not selling necessarily your service or your product. I mean, you're selling you. You can have a great service, but if you're a jerk, they're never going to buy from you. Same goes for business to business, but they're going to do a lot more research into you personally, into your company. And I'm sure you've seen that, through doing business to business. But also another thing I think that contributes to that is that you have like a fixed area where you can, work, and companies you can work with. But with door to door, it's unlimited. There's always another door. We have goals to knock 200 doors a day or 100 doors a day and talk to this many decision makers every day. And so there's never ending resources for us. I guess it depends on which area in the United States you go to, but it feels like there's unlimited resources. So it's just a numbers game, more doors you knock, the more sales you get.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is a fortunate thing. Maybe it's unfortunate in some cases, but I think that mindset kind of bleeds over to business to business. I think the business to business mindset also kind of bleeds over to the like residential door knocking, right? And
totally.
Sometimes that advice is really good advice. Like activity will drive sales, and you hit enough numbers, enough doors. Yes, awesome, right? But with business to business, it's interesting because sometimes you'll go in just because you want to hit that door to get your activity metrics, but then you don't give the person the time of the day, right? Or like you have a lot of gatekeepers, right? You have like secretaries or receptionists or whatever. And if you don't make friends with them and treat them with respect, you ain't getting in to see the owner, like straight up. Like if they don't like you, it's game over.
You're done. Yeah, you're done.
Whereas like with residential, you probably don't see that as much, right? There's probably not as many gatekeepers that will try to keep you out, right?
Yeah, not as many. Occasionally you get a Karen or a Kevin that is like, I am the tenant of the HOA and you're not allowed in here, even though we are like permitted and licensed and are cool with the police, not very many, but it also a big thing for me. I love working with the wives, actually. Like I get, if a wife answers the door, I'm not always just like, because a lot of salespeople, especially door to door, will say like, hi, where's your husband? Can I speak with your husband? A lot of the times I'll get really like familiar with and relate to the wife, like as a woman working hard, and show them a lot of respect. I always like respect a lot of the stay-at-home moms a lot. Right. And then, because I mean, I'm guessing you're a husband and father, right?
I am. Yep.
Awesome. I'm sure if your wife comes to you with something that she wants and a person that she likes, you just kind of, happy wife,
Yeah. Like I tell her, I'm like, look, you don't have to ask me permission to buy anything. Like you just go do what you do. Like I trust you, whatever. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. But like, that's got to be kind of a interesting situation too. Right. Because like, for example, if I was to say something like, I love to work with the wives, like that may not come off as
People
well.
weird.
Like,
Yeah.
right. Like, it's very, very different. It's a different brand, right? Like that's like, I think a lot of like rookie salespeople, when they first start out, they kind of get into this pattern of wanting to copy what the veteran sales reps do, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I mean, that's what I did. That's kind of what you did, it sounds like, right? But you've probably taken some of that advice and you've molded it to fit your own personal brand, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, that's honestly an advantage I think women have in general, is coming off as less threatening, less pushy. And so for me, being able to relate to people in a totally different way, I think gives me an advantage. I mean, I don't know if you knew this, but women actually sell 13% better than men, just straight out of the gates. And I think that has to do with, a lack of, if you're good at it anyway, just like not being threatening, and having a little bit more natural empathy and nurturing, where we, this is a very generalized statement. My husband's very nurturing and very gentle, but where we can just kind of feel what people are feeling. And so I think that gives us a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah. I think you're right about that, because like I've been on ride-alongs with reps who are women, and my industry is more of like the textile uniforms, so like my bread and butter account would be like an auto body shop, right? If I walk into an auto body shop with my blue suit on with a tie, right, and my shirt or whatever, people go, it's a sales guy, I don't want to talk to him. Like I go in, I go, hey, look, I'm looking for the owner. Oh, he's not here today, right? Meanwhile, I can see that the back office, there's a guy sitting there. I'm pretty sure that's the owner, right?
Yeah.
But then if I have one of my reps who I'm riding with actually walk up and she goes, hey, I'm looking for the owner. Like I've seen guys fall over themselves pretending that they're the owner just to talk to her. And I'm like,
that's so funny.
It's just not fair,
Yeah.
But
all right.
yeah. But like I think that like you hit on something very important. That's trust, right? People buy from who they trust. And I think that's one of the reasons I think I've been successful in my territory, is because I've spent so much time here kind of cultivating a relationship and not necessarily going for the kill, like on the first meeting, not asking for the business right away, just kind of being like a trusted advisor or consultant. Right. So as a rep that hits like 100 to like 200 doors a day, how do you build trust in a fast and a quick way, or a way to do it?
Sure. I think the biggest way you can build trust, especially in such a short amount of time, is body language over anything else. Has got to be the way you smile at somebody, the way you head nod at them, and especially in the way that you handle their objections. When they have something to say, not doing the deer in the headlights, or not taking a step back or anything like that, but almost laughing at them, but not in a rude way at all, but laughing with them. You know what I mean? Being like if you were to say like, oh yeah, like my wife's the boss, and I say, yeah, for sure, that's how it is in my house too, and then we both laugh about it,
Right.
And that relationship, just that body language, that immediate response, that's what builds trust in short periods of time.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that. I have a great story about that too. But so like a long time ago, it's like I had a sales manager named Brandon. Shout out to Brandon Price. I miss you, buddy. But he taught me something super valuable, and it was something that I didn't know I was doing until he actually told me about it. But like I used to get frustrated because I would answer objection after objection after objection the same way that I would answer objections in like 100 different businesses prior to walking into this one, and it just wasn't working. And I'm like, is it something I'm saying? Is it my tone? Like, what's going on? And Brandon said, do you realize that you start to answer the objection before they've even completed the sentence? And I'm like, so is it like interrupting? He goes, no. It's just that you've done this for so long. you've heard every single objection you could possibly hear. And so you're very quickly putting it out there, but to them, it's the first time they've ever brought it up. And I went,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I can't believe I was doing that. So I've
Yeah.
really taken the time to sit back and actually listen to the prospect and have them finish their question, because once again, like, it is the first time that they're giving this objection, like, and they want to be heard, right? So
Mhm.
to me, like what you're talking about is a conscious thing, right? Body
Absolutely.
language, nodding, right? Empathy, that's all super, super important. So yeah, awesome. Now, was that all stuff that you had like a sales trainer teach you like when you first started, or is that just something that you picked up and you can just articulate it now?
A little bit of both, I would say. As soon as it was taught to me, it was like, oh, like that makes so much sense. And now it comes very naturally, right? The smiling and the nodding. It's funny. I'll even catch my husband doing it to me sometimes. I'll be like, hey, babe, the new Pokemon game is coming out near Christmas. All your brothers are getting it, and we want to play together. Is that okay with you? I'm like, get your freaking head nods and your smile away from me. But well, it's just like become a natural part of the way we communicate with each other and with people. And we'll be talking to other couples or other people, and I'll notice that I'm doing it or that he's doing it, and I'm like, gosh, like it's become such a natural way of being agreeable and getting other people to be agreeable, and it's just successful. So I think it's just become both. It both was something that I'm just friendly naturally, but once I was taught those skills, it just molded right into the words that I use.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, my wife does the same thing. Like I'll use the if this then that like technique, and she'll look at me and go,
Yeah.
listen, don't you dare try your little sales bull crap on me. Okay, like I know all your tricks, they will not be used on me. And I'm like, okay,
That's
that's
so
fair enough.
funny.
I love you.
Yeah, if anyone can see through it, it's your spouse.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I actually want to know, Philip,
Yeah.
what's been your there? Because there are times on the doors where I run into a sales guy who lives there, right? And he'll be like, "Oh, you're rolling my objections," or be like, "Oh yeah, bandwagon approach," you know. So how do you approach that in the business to business world? Do you ever get guys that pick apart your pitch while you're giving it to them, or that like talk about good or bad things that you do, or does that even happen?
So there's two different, like, I guess you would say, like, categories of people that do that usually. The first one is maybe somebody that's been through the ringer, they know a ton about the industry, right? And they've been with 3 of my competitors or whatever. And so they'll just kind of like ask me like really direct questions. And
Sure.
typically I'll match the intensity and just come back and go,
Mhm.
okay, I can take my little discovery form that has all my questions on it, just set that aside, and we'll just have a conversation just straight up. Like, I'll tell you exactly what makes us different, right? We'll go over all this, right? So I think they really respect that.
Sure.
But the second guy, like, I had this happen to me.
Individual.
Let's see, when was this? I want to say like 6 months ago. In fact, I made a YouTube video about it. So like there was
Really?
a guy who, like, I was sitting down with. He actually owned a restaurant, and pre the back when I set the appointment with him, he told me that he was actually a sales manager with one of my competition, like way back in the day. So like I was super intrigued to talk to him, because I'm like, well, I want to know everything that you guys went over, because I'm curious about the way that company works. And he's like, sure. At the end of my pitch, I remember him going, do you mind if I give you some sales advice? And see, like, that kind of reaction is the same reaction I had. I was like, oh no, where's this going?
Wow.
Like, what kind of advice
Right.
do you
Yeah.
give me? Right. So then
Yeah.
like I came back at him and I said, only if you let me give you some cooking advice. And he like stopped and looked at me like this, and I went, and I copied it.
Ooh.
Like, and then like he smiled. And so that, like, I started smiling, we started laughing, and we just kind of dropped it after that. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're not going to give me any sales advice. But
Yeah,
On the
start now,
opposite
yeah.
side, I've also been that guy that I'll get pest control people that knock on my door too, or like security people or whatever. And I'll sit there and listen to them because I want to know what their pitch is. I want to know if I set them an objection, how do you answer that objection? Right.
Mhm.
And in most cases, like it's not really something that I need right now. So I'll take their information, their card, I'll reach out to them on LinkedIn, I'll connect, right?
Sure.
But I do like to hear that because I do believe in karma as a salesperson. Like if I hear somebody out that maybe it's their first sales job ever and they're super uncomfortable, like I want to make them
Mhm.
as comfortable as possible and kind of give them like a softball before they go to my neighbor, and my neighbor just like slams the door in their face, you know? Um, so yeah, I think being in sales,
Totally, yeah,
like
uh-huh.
it really helps to kind of get to know those people too and kind of see what they do. So I hope to answer your question. That was a long-winded answer. I apologize.
No, you're good. No, I totally agree with that. And in fact, being a salesperson has made me the biggest softy to like salespeople. Like
Yep.
if I remember before I went out for the summer, some guy came and knocked on our apartment door and he was raising money for like a charity. And I was in the middle of a therapy appointment online, like via Zoom. And I had just had like a hard day, a rough day. And this kid knocks on my door and I open the door and I'm like furious. um, and this is before I'd even gone out. And I, to this day, I think about this poor skinny white boy on my doorstep. And I open the door and I see him go with this little poster and he goes, "Hi, my name is John and I'm raising money for, you know." And I was like, I'm in an important meeting right now. And I like shut the door. I was like, oh my gosh. I think about him all the time and I want him to come back to my door every day because now when people come to my door, or at BYU Idaho, they have what's called IBC, where they have little businesses around campus run by students. And anytime somebody comes up and pitches me something good, overcomes my objections, I'll buy, sure, I'll spend $10 on your little small business, you know?
Right.
And so it has me being really empathetic toward salespeople, and it makes me want to support a lot more small businesses and people that work hard to earn what they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I think that a lot of people don't understand about uh like business owners, right? Is number
Mhm.
one, if you're a small business owner, they say that's like the backbone of America, right? That's what we all kind of run on. That's
Totally.
what drives our economy ultimately. And a lot of those small business people who I've talked to got there through the same kind of grit and the same kind of uh like perseverance and goal setting that you did, right? So I mean, they just made it work. They took a huge risk. They put themselves in debt, like thousands of dollars, and most businesses live at a 13 to 14% like profit margin, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, like I really respect that, and having been a sales rep that walks into businesses on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, it's really interesting to get to know people and to find out kind of what their stories are, right? So yeah,
Totally.
absolutely. I had another question I was going to ask you, and now it flew out of my head. Um, I don't know. Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. So, being a highly competitive person myself and striving after the
Mhm.
ever elusive accolade of President's Club, I will get there, First. I will get to President's Club. You'll see this year. Um, like what kind of like accolades, what kind of uh um promotional like competitions do you have with your company now?
Sorry, you'll have to say that one more time. I think you said, what kind of promotions and like positions do I have right now in my company?
Yes. So like as far as like accolades or like promotional like competitions, like I mean,
Mhm.
like what does that look like with your company that you work for now?
Yeah, good question. So for right now, this last year, what it was is if you bring in over 150,000 in revenue, then you get promoted to be a team leader or a manager or recruiter or however you want to say it. So basically, it's just that pyramid, right, of how most sales programs go, right? You bring people on, you get a portion of theirs. But not only that, but there's what's called LTIP, which is a long-term incentive program, where because Aptiv, and this is public news, because Aptiv is being looked at by some IPOs and things like that, possibly going public in a few years. They are able to put a couple of people on salary. And I don't know if I don't think this is like super private information, but essentially you get a big pay raise, you get on salary, and you get to run your own team, which is really exciting for me. So that's awesome. And obviously every year that you come back, you get a better contract, right? So for me right now, I'm sitting really comfortably for being 22. Sometimes I get too ahead of myself and I get frustrated that I'm not farther along in life, but I have to remember, like, it's okay. You're 22, you have a husband and a dog and a good job. Like, you're fine. I have to remember that, that where I can be I don't have to be where I ultimately want to be right now, but that I can just take every day as it comes. And as long as I become 1% better today than I was yesterday, then by the end of the year, I'm 37% better. Oh, no, is it 37 times better? Something like that. And overall, just a better person.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like that's something I wish I would have kept in perspective back when I was in my 20s. Because I remember back when I was 16 years old, I used to get really impatient. My dad used to tell me, and he still says it to this day. He says, "Son, tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to be married and you're going to have kids and you're going to feel like this conversation was yesterday." And he's right. Like I'm married now. I have 4 just beautiful but super crazy kids. And I feel like the conversation was yesterday we talked about that. So now it's funny because if I get impatient, he'll start to tell me something. I know he's going to say, "You're going to be 50 years old. You're going to be thinking, where did I go wrong in life?" So I just cut him off. I'm like, no.
Totally, yeah.
We're not going to talk about it, So yeah, like for 20-year-olds, I feel like that's something important to keep in mind is that yeah, it sounds like you're on the right track. I mean, you're obviously in school. It's like, I mean, you have a goal that you're aspiring to ultimately to become a teacher. And it sounds like you're very competitive in your field now, which is awesome. So last question for you. Who is the better salesperson between you and your husband?
Me, period. No, he's awesome. My husband is awesome. I think, in a relationship, usually you have somebody who is a little more loud and then somebody who kind of is more responsible. So we like to say that I keep him on his toes and he keeps me grounded. My husband is he's the kindest, most quiet servant, most tender, most like Jesus Christ. And that's who I hold dear to me, right? He is just a great man. And because of that, he's very tender. He's very tenderhearted. And so when people tell him like, "Oh, I don't want you here," he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to offend you." Or like, he's so tenderhearted that while he is very good at sales, I wouldn't say he thrives in it, because I mean, and once again, like, sales just isn't for everyone, which is totally fine. But me, I get a little bit like feisty, like, "All right, fine, I'll go sell your neighbor," So, and I think like the long hours and stuff, that's a little bit easier for me too, just because of the background and the physical and mental experience that I've had in the past. But my husband's a way better student than I am. I'll admit that. He's way smarter and better at school than I am. But it's just always a give and take between which strengths we have that fill the gaps of the other,
What's his name again?
Cooper is his name.
Sorry, what?
Cooper.
Cooper, shout out to you, man. Well, listen, I wish you the best luck in your career. If you have any questions, now, so feel free to reach out. If you, Cooper, and then Devin, Cosette, ever want to hang out, like we're local as well. We've known Devin's wife, my wife and I, for like a long time, having been in church, whatever. And then we just met him 3 years ago. He's super
Awesome.
yeah. But man, that is a crazy, crazy story about dog bites and perseverance and goal setting. There's a
Yeah. Crazy time.
but thank you so much. I mean, in case somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do it? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Instagram? Facebook? How do you want people to reach out?
Probably LinkedIn for professional, professional reasons. Just Mariah Brown on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. I really
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Philip. I would love to.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, if you guys like this content, hit the like button right here, hit subscribe, reach out to me if you have questions on LinkedIn as well, and we will talk to you guys later. Thanks again for listening.